So now that we have our task expectation, we now need to use this to form the criteria. And some of the important aspects of the criteria is that the actual individually identified expectations or aims of the task are broken down into the criteria. So the criteria should be broken down into simple units. Don't make them complex. Don't make them too big. Have simple, clear units. It's essential that the criteria is measurable. If you don't put something that's measurable, you're not going to be able to assess it. The next aspect is that it should come from the original content. And this obviously depends on the nature of the subject, but somehow you do have to bring some content into it. Then we also need to look at the individual skills that are required. So don't put a clump of skills together for criteria. Make sure that you can divide them into individual skills as much as possible. And then, of course, you can divide your criteria into various categories. Now let's look back at what our task expectation was. We had 4 key things that we were looking for in this task. The first was we wanted more than factual recount. The second is we want the learners to show understanding. Then we want to be able to show or see how much research they have done and whether they're able to do research. And then, of course, we need to look at the actual piece of writing. Does it show planning? Have they set it out logically and show understanding? And then, of course, have they drawn conclusions? So from this task expectation, we now look at the criteria we're looking for in the actual rubric. So the first is we want to see that the learner provides factual recounts of the leader. The next, understanding of the leader's contribution to democracy. And remember, the key word there is understanding. We want to see whether they've done research. We want to see that they've got a good choice of words and explanations, because that is going to determine their writing. And then, of course, the writing process. Have they gone through a process? And that would show planning and understanding, and then, of course, the drawing of conclusions. So do you see how directly the task expectation leads to the criteria? It really is just a little bit more specific. And the better you set out your task expectation, the easier it is to determine the criteria. So why is criteria so important? Well, the first is each of the criterion is assessed individually. And then the second, which we must really remember, because at the end of the day we want to make sure this rubric's effective, is the overall mark of the rubric is actually based on the individual scores of each criterion. So we need to make sure that they're clear, and like we said in the beginning, that they are measurable.